Hey guys, in this video we're going to be talking about the changes that are coming on December 4th with the new Retribution expansion for EVE Online. I was going to actually write this up and do like a long written article about it, but based on the size, there's just no chance that I can sit down and write for about 5 hours to try to get this thing done. So I'm just going to do a video of it and I'm going to talk about the important points. I think the first most important thing that everybody needs to know is that CCP went a little bit crazy with the amount of changes they're putting into the game in one expansion. I don't think they've ever made this many changes in one expansion. So, and that affects so many parts of the game that, there's so many different things that are changing. I'm worried, one, that there's going to be a lot of broken game mechanics, a lot of exploitable things that people are going to find with the new changes, and that it's going to cause some chaos for a while, and CCP will be spending most of their next expansion fixing all the stuff that got messed up in this expansion. I could be wrong, but there's just so much here that it just seems a little bit ambitious for me. New changes are always cool. New changes make the game more interesting and keep it from getting stale and boring. But at some point, there's so many changes here that it's going to take people a long time to really relearn the game to understand all these changes. So first of all, you got this right here. Let's see. That doesn't help. All right, we got that right there. That's the basic system they're using now for ship classes. They're going to try to put each ship into a tier. They're calling it tier-aside or something like that. But you can see here they got the combat frigates, they got the attack frigates, disruption, support, exploration, and mining now. And you already know most of these things. They've been talking about these things for a while for the frigates. Combat frigates are basically all around balanced frigates that have good defenses, good offenses. Same thing goes across for cruisers. Attack tend to be the faster frigates and cruisers that are more, their defense is more based on their speed and distance. While they still have some offensive capabilities, but usually not as much as the combat frigates. Disruption, they're going in and they're doing lots of changes. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, but they're doing a lot of changes to the E-War in the game and the disruption frigates themselves, which I think is a good thing. I think most of the changes are a good thing. I just think they're too ambitious. Let's go back here. Alright. So they're going to go through here and they're going to list, this is one of the new dev blogs or whatever, and they're listing pretty much all the changes that are going to be in the new expansion. I don't think they talk about Crimewatch except for right here, and I think that that's one of the most important changes is Crimewatch in the bounty hunting system. Basically, with what's happening, I'm not 100% sure of this yet, but best I can tell, can flipping will die with the Retribution expansion. In my past articles I wrote that there's a chance it may survive, but the more I read about Crimewatch, the more I see that can flipping pretty much has no chance of surviving in its current form, which really irritates me because can flipping was one of the easiest ways to get into PvP for very new characters. I mean, for a character that had less than 1 million skill points, can flipping was a way you could go out there and you could start killing cruisers and above with just a good fitting and some good tactics. And CCP is kind of killing that, which irritates me. What's going to replace it, I think, is going to be, I don't know what the name they're going to have for it. There's going to be some name that's going to come up, and some creative random forum person is going to come up with some name for this tactic. But I think a new tactic that's going to come out with the Crimewatch is people using the suspect flag, which is a flag that if you steal from a can, it allows everyone in the game to shoot at you, but you're not shot at by gate guns, you're not shot at by Concord, Navy, NPCs. Just players have the ability to shoot at you, but should they shoot at you, you can shoot back. So maybe they'll call it suspect baiting. But basically suspect baiting will be where you purposely get a suspect flag, and then you go around and you bait people into attacking you with the intention of either having better PvP skills and a better fit than they do and effectively isolating them, or as what the more likely thing is going to be, that you're going to be in a fleet with some logistics or something that's going to come in, which is also affected by Crimewatch, because with the Crimewatch, any logistics that reps you will take all your timers. So any logistics that reps you when you have suspect flag, the logistics will get the suspect flag as well for the same time, and they'll get aggro to whoever you're shooting at. But that doesn't really matter if you're sitting there in a let's say in a thorax and you're attacking a Megathron or a whatever ship, and then in comes 4 logistics cruisers, or even 1 logistics cruiser, or hell, 1 logistics frigate would be enough to turn the tide of that fight. So big changes with Crimewatch. The bounty hunting system, it's going to make PvP a little bit more profitable. There's something I'm going to be actually writing about for my IS guide with bounty hunting, that there's already, unless there's some way of implementing the system that CCP hasn't told us, the way I currently see them implementing bounty hunting, it's going to be exploitable. But I'm going to save that for my IS customers. It's not really going to be an exploit. It's going to be a way that people can take advantage of the system to make ISK. I mean, it's just kind of a silly thing. It's not going to be a big way to make ISK. It's just something that will eventually be fixed, I think. I don't know. But on to the more important changes here. With the frigates, there's the Kestrel is going to be turned from a missile boat to a missile boat, so nothing new there. They're just going to give it a boost so that it's no longer kinetic only. It's going to be all damage types will get a bonus, which is good. Being limited to kinetic really limits your capabilities and makes your ship very easy to counter. Other than that, I think they're going to change some of the fitting requirements so that it can fit the long-range missiles better. Right now, if you put all standard launchers, Tech 2 standards, on a Kestrel, you have no room left to fit anything else, so the entire ship's trash. I believe they're going to fix that and help with the fitting, and we're going to talk, actually there's more about fitting further down here. The Tristan, I think, is very cool, having a good Tech 1 drone frigate. I think that's pretty cool. It's got 5 light drones, bonuses to tracking speed of drones and hybrid turrets. It's interesting. I'm not sure how people are going to use that. I think I would use it as a standoff ship and let the drones go in. Fit some rail guns, micro warp drive. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see what the actual ship looks like. The Breacher, I don't think there's a whole lot of potential there. I think it's getting a shield rep bonus. So maybe that once it comes out, people will be running some faction or plex shield reps with it, and that might make it a powerful ship. You could say ancillary shield boosters would work with that, but we'll find more about those in a minute. Those are getting nerfed. I don't know. The Breacher has potential. I'm not too optimistic though. Let's see, the disruption frigates. They don't talk about the attack frigates in here, do they? No, they don't. They've already talked about this. The attack frigates are basically just T1 interceptors is all they are. Disruption frigates, the Crucifier, all tracking disruptors are getting a little bit of a buff, and the tracking disruptor and the Crucifier in general is getting a buff to its tracking disruptor effectiveness. And they're also, I believe, going to get the range, a new mid slot. It's going to have a drone bay, which is, I don't know, not a big deal. It helps, but again, not a big deal. What they're doing with a lot of the disruption frigates is they're adding distance, and they're giving it the potential to keep itself safe by being at a longer range. At least that's what they're writing here. I haven't actually looked at the stats, but it says extreme distances. So having a fleet where you have a Crucifier doing tracking disrupting from 80k, 100k, that makes running a Crucifier in a fleet a lot more practical than having a Crucifier limited to only like 30, 40k, where he can be one shot off the field. So that's interesting. The Griffin, they basically said that it's good enough as it is, so they're not going to really change anything about it. ECM in general is getting a nerf that we'll talk about here in a second. But so ECM in general is getting a little bit of a nerf. The Griffin's not getting much of a buff, so in all, it's probably going to decrease a little bit in effectiveness. But They say they're going to change the slot layout. Maybe that'll help a little. I don't know. ECM was potentially a little bit overpowered. So the nerf, a lot of people are going to be happy with the ECM nerf. A lot of people are going to hate it. Personally, I think I like the ECM nerf. I'm against anything in the game that makes solo harder. Some of the things right now that make solo flying harder in the game are being permajammed by a guy who just happens to have a Falcon alt or has a Falcon in the fleet. I mean, how can you take on a fleet solo if they have even one ECM ship? It makes it a serious pain to fight them because you have to isolate the Falcon out of the fight, which takes a lot of work. But the other thing that's really irritating me right now that CCP is not even addressing here is bonus webs right now. There's people out there running a camp, which I think is good for them because it works. But I think it messes up solo, and it's killed me twice now. And it's basically a camp where they have remote sensor boosted daredevils sitting there with they have bonus webs for velocity, so it's like 99% velocity stop you, right? So it's got a scram and a web. Daredevil sitting on the gate. He's remote sensor boosted, so he instantly locks you. And then they have artillery sitting at range to one-shot you off the field. So basically all they have to do is web you and hold you for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then the artillery ships, the whatever they happen to be, they could be tornadoes, they could be maelstroms, Macarials, one-shot you off the field no matter what you're in, pretty much. So I was in a Dramiel, and that camp right there that I just described was able to kill my Dramiel before it got back to the gate. I think that's broken. The game should not operate that way, but as long as it does operate that way, I mean, I'm not going to be upset at people for using the game mechanics that are in the game. However, I think CCP needs to fix that, because if a Dramiel can't get through a gate camp of about 5 people, then there's really no sense. I mean, what's the whole point of it? The Dramiel's, it's got a low sig, it's super fast, it should be able to run back to the gate in time to get out. But when it's insta-locked, webbed, and scrammed, there's really no hope for the Dramiel to escape that kind of a camp. But moving on, enough of a rant. The Maulus is getting the same kind of bonus as the Crucifier. Remote sensor damps, more range. Vigil, long range target painting. I don't know, it's going to have its uses. I'm not too excited about it. And here we have logistics frigates, which I think is cool. Logistics frigates, that's going to change frigate warfare in a big way. Logistics frigates, I mean, when you think about things like, I think they mentioned here, like faction warfare plexes, going into a minor plex with logistics backup, or being able to hide your frigate logistics backup when you're going into it. There's lots of interesting tactics that could be developed. Having, for example, cloaked logistics frigates sitting there already in the plex, and then baiting a fight, and then they uncloak. They've got their cloaking delay of whatever it is, 10 seconds or whatever. So then after the 10 seconds, they are able to lock you and rep you, and you win the fight. So lots of tricky stuff that could happen with that. And just in general, running like logistics frigates with, I don't know, you could run it with shield tanks, stealth bombers, and interceptors. And just a basic twist on the old stealth bomber interceptor gang, where you have the interceptors tackle the targets, and the stealth bombers apply DPS from 50-80k out, and the logistics frigates keep everything alive. So there's lots of interesting little things you could do. Exploration frigates, I'm just not interested. I don't care. Some people will. If you want to, you can go read that. Mining frigate, again, don't care. It just doesn't matter. Interesting. Warp core strength +2. That's interesting. That means you can't even tackle that thing with a scram. So you're going to have to have at least 2 ships. That's going to be irritating. +2 warp core strength. All right, with the destroyers, CCP is also changing destroyers. The most important destroyer, the Thrasher, no changes. But the Coercer has long been one of the best destroyers that was worthless because it only had one mid slot. I've seen people fly the destroyer and get lots of kills with it, even with one mid slot, just based on the use of the laser turrets. It's going to have a lot more potential. They're adding a mid slot to it, removing a low slot. I think that's going to be pretty cool with the way they're doing that, so that it's going to be able to maybe not be as good as the Thrasher, but it's going to be close. And because of the range, let's see. Yeah, they're going to keep the range bonus. Because of the range, you could run pulse lasers with Scorch, and you could kite your targets. You could kite a Thrasher, most likely. Depends on the speed and agility and all that, but we'll have to see. The Cormorant, that's, let's see. They moved a mid to the low to give it more DPS, or fitting options, depending on how you do it. Not much else. So I don't see that becoming a very popular ship. The Catalyst, they are trading one drone for extra power grid and giving it more, or trying to push it more towards railguns, which, yeah, maybe. The new destroyers, they're bringing out 4 new destroyers with Retribution. I think it's going to be cool, but I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. The Dragoon's probably the most interesting of all of them to me. It's a drone-based Amar destroyer that's got bonus webs, or not bonus webs, bonus newts and Nazes. It's saying energy vampires. I don't call them that. I call them Nazes. But anyways, the problem with the bonus to the range, I was looking at the stats for them, and the bonus to the range, it's a bonus to the small size newts. So if you go in thinking this is going to be like a curse in the package of a destroyer, you're actually wrong, because even with level 5 destroyer skill, I think you're limited to your range of like 12k on your Nas or your Newt. With Faction or Plex, you might be able to get that out to 15k. But if I'm right, this is what I remember. I remember running the numbers when I first saw these talked about, and it's not enough of a bonus to range to really give you curse-like abilities. But it will make for a great ship to kill frigates in, and because these are in general going to be very fast, from what I hear, I think it's going to be a really cool ship to fly with the destroyers and the flexibility the destroyers get. The Corax, that's going to be the Caldari missile destroyer. That's overdue. I mean, they say long awaited, but there's no reason that the Cormorant should have ever been a turret destroyer. I mean, Caldari is so focused on missiles that it should have always been missiles. Let's see, bonus to kinetic. Interesting, they went with kinetic instead of all. Explosion velocity. So it looks like they're going to probably have it as something that's going to be a fast, long-range destroyer. The Algos, let's see, 35 drone bandwidth. That's interesting. That's going to be another drone destroyer. Let's see, 35. So that means that the Mar one's probably going to be limited to 25. It's a little bit more DPS with railguns. I would probably run that one as a kite. Most likely. You'd have to see the actual slot layout to see. But that's interesting. And the Mimitar one, it looks like it's going to be kind of like the Caldari, except I imagine it's going to be a lot faster. Micro warp drive signature radius bonus, that's cool. Missile velocity bonus, that means that if you're moving fast, the missiles will keep up and you can take out small ships a little bit more easily. So again, like with the destroyer, with the Mimitar destroyer, I'm thinking something that's going to stay out at range. It's going to move fast, and it's going to try to avoid DPS by signature somewhat, but even with the radius bonus, it's still going to take a good amount of damage. However, I don't know. I think there's potential there. I don't know exactly. I'd say most likely it's going to be something that stays out at about 20k and tries to do DPS from a range. I would imagine, I haven't heard anything about the speed yet, but if I had to guess, I'm guessing it'll be going about 2 or 3k a second, and I'm hoping more towards 3k a second. Combat cruisers, just like the combat frigates, you got they're reworking all the combat cruisers, or all these cruisers, to be combat cruisers. And what that basically means is they're just making them a little bit more viable. Right now, cruisers as a whole in the game of EVE Online suck. You almost never see pilots flying Tech 1 cruisers. Even new pilots these days. New pilots just jump right over them to battlecruiser, and that's what I've told people, is don't even worry about cruisers. They're kind of junk as the game stands right now. So I'm happy they're changing them. There were a few cruisers that were nice. The Vexor was nice, the Rupture, the Thorax. Caracal in limited circumstances. The Mauler was always good as a bait ship, but now they're going to change the laser cap use for a laser damage bonus, which is a good thing. I think that it's still not going to be a great ship, but because of the tank, I think it's going to be a ship that people are going to start using a little bit. The MOA, I think, is going to get a good amount of use because they're changing the optimal range bonus to a damage bonus, which is going to make the MOA basically another Thorax, a shield tank Thorax. Interesting. With the shield resistance bonus, it's probably going to be able to fit a pretty nice tank. I don't know how to change in the slots. Yeah, going to give it another mid slot. So another mid slot, more damage. It's going to be a pretty nice close range combat ship. I think that you're going to see a lot more of those. The Vexor, they're basically, let's see, giving it an extra mid slot and improved speed. So what I see for the Vexor is kind of what I used to see a lot as a trick fit for the Vexor that people would fit unexpectedly. Most people would always expect the Vexor to be an armor tank. They'd expect for it to be an armor tank, kind of slow, use drones, or stay at range. But something that I saw a lot of people get kills in was a pure gank Vexor. A Vexor that did like 700-800 DPS, where they'd fit it with all damage mods in the lows. They'd fit it with shield tank in the mids, blasters up top, drones, medium drones, and then they'd get a massive amount of DPS out of it, which was unexpected. A lot of people expected the Vexor to be more tanky than ganky, so they would typically get surprised by it, and that would give you an advantage if you were in the Vexor. So what's going to happen now is they're going to basically make that more viable, that whole strategy. By an extra mid slot means you're going to be able to fit a better shield tank, and with the low slots now being able to be used for the drone damage increasing mod, I think that's going to make the Vexor very interesting, and they're talking about that later on. They're actually going to buff the module that gives drones more damage. So overall, drone damage for the entire game, or after Retribution, you're going to see a lot more use of drones, because so many of the ships are starting to turn a little bit more towards drones. If you look back, some of the stuff here, you got some of the destroyers starting to get drone bays. You've got some of the frigates starting to become drone frigates. You've got all this stuff going towards drones, and you've got that new drone damage mod that's getting buffed to do more damage. So you're going to start seeing drone cruisers putting out probably 300 to 400 DPS in just drone DPS, which is pretty powerful because it's so flexible across ranges and across damage types and speeds and just everything. So I'm excited about the Vexor. Rupture, unfortunately, they're not doing too much. They're moving a high to a mid, which means you're going to lose your newt that you would usually put there on the Rupture, and you're going to gain some kind of more tank. I don't know. I mean, if you're running the Rupture as a kite, which is what I used to do, then I think that's going to give it some potential. Maybe an arty kite, which I don't think I ever did. I think I ran autocannon kite. But by losing the newt, you're a little bit more susceptible to frigates. By gaining the mid slot, you're going to be able to get more tank, which it's interesting. They're not doing a whole lot for it, but you know, maybe the mid slot will make some changes for it. I'm interested to try all these cruisers once the changes come out, because it's a stage in the game that needs to be addressed just overall by PvP. I'm getting a little bit sick of the only options in PvP being small, fast frigates or crazy expensive T3 cruisers or faction battleships or faction cruisers. I mean, I think PvP is getting pushed too much away from the middle and too much to the exterior, kind of the beginner small ships or the extreme expensive, unrealistic, expensive ships that most people don't even like to fly in PvP, because unless you already have PvP'd a lot in the past, learning in a T3 is going to be very, very expensive. So I really want to see the more intermediate type ships getting some action and some PvP buffs. Attack cruisers, also very interesting. The Thorax was already doing okay. I would have considered the Thorax more of a combat cruiser, to be honest, but they're calling it an attack cruiser. They're going to give it, I think, some more speed. Yeah, more speed and mid-slot and hybrid weapon tracking bonus. I mean, with blasters up close, that might help against some frigates. Otherwise, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Increase your damage overall some. But yeah, it's going to get up close and just melt face. Gank ship is still what it is, but it's going to do that job a little better. Caracal, I don't know. I'm hoping they make it reasonable, but I'm not too hopeful. Omen, a lot of people say the Omen was terrible, and I thought it was pretty terrible too, but I managed to get kills in the Omen and thought it was a fun ship. I actually would take an Omen over a Caracal for solo PvP, but unless I was killing frigates with my anti-frig Caracal. The Omen's going to get some, let's see, drone bay. I don't even think it had a drone bay before, so it's getting a drone bay. Fitting reductions, which is good. I'm hoping they change the slots around. So I think it only had 3 mid slots, and if you're trying to run it as a fast ship, you would throw some kind of shield tank in there, and it was limited to just one like large shield extender, which didn't do much for you. The most exciting of all these is obviously the Stabber. Before the nano nerf, the Stabber was basically a Tech 1 Vagabond. This was back when I was just starting in the game, and the Stabber, it was kind of considered you would go Rifter as a Mimitar pilot. You would go Rifter, Thrasher, Stabber, Vagabond, and that was kind of your PvP route as a Mimitar pilot. And the Vagabond was the king of the hill for solo PvP or small gang for a while there. And then after the nano nerf, the Stabber just, even though it was still pretty fast, you had to add modules to get it faster to make it really viable as a fast ship. And because it didn't already have a fall off bonus, you had to add a bunch of modules to it to make it so that fall off was far enough out to where you could run it like a Vaga and kite with it. Now the Stabber, they're going to add a fall off bonus, and let's see, they're going to keep the speed, but I don't know, they don't say anything about slot changes. But just with the projectile weapon fall off bonus there, that's going to make the Stabber very viable as a step up for Mimitar pilots and a step before the going to the Vagabond, which I think is going to be great. That's probably one of the first ones I'm going to fly after the patch, because I think that it's something that used to be there, and I think it's something that should have always been there a good, fast, nano-style cruiser. I'm worried about the DPS output. That's one of the problems right now. No matter how you fit it, you're lucky to get 200 DPS out of it effectively. I'm hoping they get that up to at least about 300. Otherwise, it's going to be limited to just killing frigates and very isolated ratters. Disruption cruisers, same thing as the frigates. Arbitrator's going to get better, which is good. Let's see, what are they changing? Better tracking disruptor, extra mid slot, extra low slot. Okay, so with the extra low slot, he can add another damage rig for his, not damage rig, damage module for the drones, which is going to be cool. So you're talking, you know, about 300 DPS out of drones from the arbitrator. Blackbird, it's getting a range bonus to counter some of the ECM nerf. I mean, let's just talk about the ECM nerf before we get much further. I didn't read too closely, but from what I got out of the ECM nerf, or actually I think they talk about it here further down, but what I got out of it was basically with the ECM nerf, they're going to change the optimal ranges a lot on a lot of the ships, but more importantly, the most important part of the ECM nerf is they're going to introduce new skills into the game that will allow you to increase your sensor strength based on each one of the jamming, whatever you want to call them, racial jammers. So there's going to be the 4 different skills that you can train, and I suggest everybody train as quickly as possible up to level 4, level 5, to make it harder for yourself to be jammed, just overall. So that's something I'm going to be training as soon as it comes out, and I think most people will get that very quickly up to level 4, level 5 on all of them. Don't just go with one. I think down here they say, well, you just train the one that you think you're going to encounter. No, train all of them. Let's see. Support cruisers, they're doing the same thing. They're going to change the current logistics cruisers and make them a little bit better, a little bit more viable. No one's used them really in the past, except for PvE, really. You haven't seen many Tech 1 logistics cruisers in fleets. So now those are going to be a lot more viable. That tells me if they're giving them so much of a boost to the Tech 1 version, then I think some changes will be coming to the Tech 2 versions before long. Because otherwise, what's the difference? What's the reason for the cost? I mean, even if it is a performance issue, a 20 million is Tech 1 logistics fleet, or logistics cruiser fleet, where you have, say, 4 of them, they cost a total of 80 mil, and they're 80% as good as the Tech 2 that are over, 100 mil or 150, whatever they are now. It just won't make a lot of sense for a lot of fleets to run the Tech 2 unless they just don't care. But as far as efficiencies go, and a lot of people do care about efficiency, it's going to make sense to start running with a lot more of these. Changes to modules now, what they're going to do, and there's one big change here, they're going to lower the fitting requirements for a lot of the turret modules, the pulse lasers, beam lasers, artillery cannons. The big thing that's irritating me is they're going to drop the power grid on the Hurricane. But I mean, by dropping the power grid by that much on the Hurricane, they're pretty much making the Articane a lot less viable. I don't think it's going to be completely gone. I'm 90% sure it's going to still be around, but it's irritating. It's going to change the fitting of the Arty Hurricane considerably, because one thing you get is they're going to change the fitting requirements for the Arty. So the net change when you add in both the removal of power grid that's there plus the removal of needed power grid to fit, you end up losing about 75 or so power grid, I think. So what's going to happen there is you're going to, with the Articane, with that 75% or 75 power grid, you're going to have to lose one of your shield rigs to get an ancillary current router on there, or you're going to have to change the fitting in some other way to make it fit, I think. or you're going to have to drop down to 650 artilleries, which I don't think would be a good idea unless you absolutely had to. And in that case, I might favor just switching back to the autocannon cane. Missiles are getting nerfed and buffed. Heavy missiles are getting nerfed. All the rest of the missiles are getting a little buff. Well, not all the rest. They don't mention rockets. But heavy missiles, so your long-range Drake fleets, those are going to be a little less viable. Going to start favoring close-range hams, heavy assault missiles. Seeing torpedoes get a buff, that's good. I like to see that, just for the sake of stealth bombers. But all in all, I don't know. It's going to affect Drakes a lot. I mean, the Drake's just, it's iconic for being a heavy missile boat. So forcing that into a new role, either people are going to keep the nerfed heavies, or they're going to switch to heavy assaults, or they're going to abandon the Drake altogether. I don't know. I don't think they'll abandon the Drake altogether. Electronic warfare, new set of skills, sensor strength. So, yeah, we already talked about that. Remote repair modules, a little bit of fitting changes. New modules that, well, it got the, let's see. Yeah, they're adding the micro warp jump drive and the salvage drone. Salvage drone, for the mission runners, I think that's pretty cool. That's going to allow you to be a lot more profitable in your missions, because so many people run their missions like level 4s, they'll blitz them, and they just go through the mission as fast as possible. If you've got all the aggro, there's no sense just sitting there, and I mean, there's no reason not to put out salvage drones once you have all the aggro. Say you're in a perma-tanked Raven or something. Put out some salvage drones, and you can make a little bit more ISK from your missions. I imagine a lot of people are going to be losing these, but as long as you're careful about aggro, you'll be able to keep them for the most part. The micro jump drive, I believe that's only going to be fittable to battleships. I'm not positive about that, but it's a very interesting change tactically, and I think it's going to be one of the modules that's going to get used. This spectrum breaker thing that down here, I haven't even seen that in the game yet, so I don't think anybody's using that. People are using these, but the micro jump drive, you can't be warp disrupted, or warp disruption doesn't stop it from running, and it's not affected by bubbles. So it does have a spool up time, amount of time it takes for it just to get started. But if you say get pulled into a bubble and warp disrupted, then you just got to wait for this thing to spool up, and boom, you're 100k away. Most likely people are going to adapt to that, and you're going to see people, if the micro jump drive becomes something that's used more often, people are just going to start fitting more scrams, 2-point scrams. But we'll see. The cool thing about it that I would do, I mean, the initial tactic that comes to mind for me for using this would be on a sniper battleship, something like a RD Maelstrom, and you set this thing up, and you go in and you get tackled, you jump instantly 100k away. I wonder if it's going to change the lock. I really, really wonder if it's going to break your current lock, because if you were to just get pointed by, say, Ishtar, and you were to all of a sudden lock him, jump 100k away, and then fire off one shot of Arty that you have set up to do, as much damage as possible at 100k, then maybe you could, do enough damage to drop him. It'd probably take 3 or 4 battleships actually, but you get what I'm saying. To be able to jump the 100k and then be at your optimal almost instantly, I think that's going to be a tactic that might be used some. Not to mention having entire fleets that can just escape trouble with this thing. I don't know about that. We'll see. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the changes I think is going to create a big stir is the ancillary shield booster change. Everybody knows those are overpowered. They're being used by just about everyone in the game, and they're being overused because they work. And if something works, people use it. So right now, I think ancillary shield boosters, are a little bit overpowered, and CCP is going to nerf the hell out of them. So they're going to probably change the amount of, by slight reduction of effectiveness, I think they're going to change the amount boosted by a slight amount. And the most important thing is they're going to change it so they hold fewer cap boosters, which basically means that you're going to be able to run it, not run it as long. So the most popular way of running ancillary shield boosters right now is to run 2 of them, so that you have one that you'd run with, say, Navy cap boosters for, I think it's 52 seconds. Then you'd start the other and run that one for 52 seconds while the first one takes its 1 minute to reload, leaving you with about an 8-second gap between reloads of your ancillary shield boosters, and giving you a very large tank that you couldn't achieve with the same amount of slots with traditional shield boosters. So I think it's going to be a pretty huge nerf, I think, to the ancillary shield boosters, but we'll see how huge it is, and how much it changes people's use. Will people stop using them? I don't think so, but I do think that it's going to discourage the overuse of them, which you're seeing right now. And finally, there is the drone damage amplifier that I was talking about before. It's going to get a larger bonus, and it's going to use less CPU, which means that you're going to see them more, and that drone damage is going to become a bigger part of the game. Let's see, what's this? Officer drone modules. Yeah, so even more there. I don't know how much those are going to get used. If the officer drone modules affected fighters and stuff, those would be crazy valuable. Anyway, so you've got more drone DPS coming, and lots of new ships. It's going to take forever to go through these ships and kind of see what's what, and what's going to be the new popular ships and what's not, and what's going to be broken and what's not. It's going to take a long time to get through all that. As far as ISK goes, usually when there's a new expansion, I tell people what to buy to make ISK before the expansion comes. People have been working this and buying stuff for a long time because CCB's been telling people what's been coming for so long. Personally, if I had to go right now and invest in some of these ships that I think are going to go up in value, let's see, I would probably consider something like the Crucifier, maybe. Logistics frigates, of course. I've already told people to buy those. Those are going to have a big spike in value when they're first released, because everybody's going to want to try them at least. It's just such an interesting thing. I don't care about the Venture. Yeah, whatever. Destroyers. If you're going to buy any of them, Courser is probably the one to buy, followed by the Catalyst. Still, I don't think it's going to be a huge price change when it comes out. For the combat cruisers, Vexor and Moa, maybe the Rupture, definitely the Stabber. I think all the Mimitar pilots are going to rush to try the Stabber. Thorax is going to be even better. It's going to do well. For these Arbitrators, somewhat. A lot of people want to fly the Arbitrator for PvP and just never been able to really make it happen. Maybe now this will do it. Support cruisers, yeah. I think those will do pretty good. So in general, just about everything's going to have some price increase, but because there's so many changes, there's a very big space for all that money to flow into. So I'm not expecting huge changes. Had it been just like one ship changing or one class of ships changing, you'd see a much bigger price increase after the patch. Because there's so many of them, it's going to be pretty small. I don't think there's too much stuff for people to rush out and try to go buy. No one's going to go out and buy everything. They're going to go pick what's most interesting to them. Personally, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy probably 5 or 10 Stabbers. I'm going to buy several different ones of these destroyers. I can fly all of them. So I think I'd go definitely with the Mimitar and maybe the Galante or the Amar. It looks like the Galante is actually better than the Amar one. Amar would be up close. Mimitar looks like you have the option to be up close or at range. But I'll have to look at them and see what their exact fittings are and their slot layouts. That's it for this video blog, I guess is what you would call it. It's really just me being too lazy to type all this stuff out. So I hope that helps you to understand what's coming and be ready for it and to quickly adapt, which is what I'm really going to try to do, is to try to just adapt to all these changes quickly, because whoever finds the most powerful parts of it, the parts of it that are a little overpowered or that just work well, are the ones who are going to benefit the most out of it for PvP, because they're going to be able to use the ship before everybody knows that that ship is a really good PvP ship. It's just like what you saw with the T3 battle cruisers. When they first came out, people were uncertain about their capabilities. People were uncertain about how good they were. So when they first came out, you saw a huge amount of kills. If you were to go out with a PvP tier 3 battle cruiser, it was really easy to get kills at first when they first came out, because people underestimated them, didn't really understand them. Now if you take one out, it's considerably harder to get kills, and people adapt to you, and they're less likely to expose or make themselves vulnerable to your tier 3 battlecruiser. And the same thing is going to happen here. At first, you're going to see some of these destroyers just kicking butt. You're going to see some of the cruisers doing really well. But then, as it goes on, weeks, months later, people are going to adapt, and it's going to get harder to get kills with that fit. So, it's good to adapt quickly.